Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another OSR Tabletop live stream with DM Bluddworth. I welcome everybody. Once again, I apologize for the late notice of this. I was anticipating not actually being able to do very much video recording or live streams during this weekend. I am currently recovering from a sinus infection, and I just tested positive for COVID. So now I'm kind of quarantined within my little space here, which was better than being isolated elsewhere. Kind of traded places with my wife, who had COVID last week, and now we've kind of switched spaces. So got back here to do some live streams and some videos for the channel. And during the course of these last couple of days, as I've been slogging through a sinus infection, I got the opportunity to review, watch, picked up and watched the Dungeons and Dragons double feature of the movies. So the 2000 and I believe it's 2005 movies. So the first Dungeons and Dragons, and then the second Dungeons and Dragons, Wrath of the Dragon God, which I haven't watched yet. But and then I started thinking about some of the discussions in my previous live streams and videos and discussions on Discord and on other people's channels about role playing and about the three pillars of role playing games and how we can best take some of the game mechanics out of what we're doing and insert more role-playing opportunities in place of them, or at the very least take the game mechanics talk out of what we're doing at the table, and kind of masking it through more narrative and descriptive talking within our characters' voices than talking as the players at the table or the DM at the table. And this doesn't include actual voice acting, talking, in character. It just means putting your mind into your character's mind and limiting what you're talking about at the table to what your character would know, what your character would say, what your character would do in each of these scenes, because we are looking for a much more immersive cinematic experience in each of these scenes. And so that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about in this, live stream. And also, I wanted to, because when I watched the original Dungeons and Dragons movies, I also wanted to touch a little bit upon that, because that actually kind of reinforced some of the things that I was already holding to as far as my experience with Dungeons and Dragons, particularly old school Dungeons and Dragons. And I honestly believe that they still, Wizards of the Coast in 2000 still had that as part of their vision as well. And, so I will talk a little bit about my reaction to Let the Games Begin, which was a documentary attached to the video. And I have found that documentary, and I will kind of skip through that a little bit. I'll do a screen share with it and go through that, and then we can discuss with it along the way. Now, if you want to join the stream, you're certainly welcome to. I put in the first comment the link. If you want to join in, you can certainly join in. If you want to put your comments down, I will certainly bring up your comments along the way. And as we go through this, I will bounce back and forth between comments and the banner examples that I already have up there prompts, I should say. And we'll go back and forth. This should run about an hour and a half. And then we'll see if we extend beyond that based on your participation, of course. So let's go to our first comments. So, hey, Squirrel, how's it going? Good to see you. And again, if you want to pop in, you're certainly welcome to pop in. And I'm going to put some of the prompts up very quickly and in kind of rapid order, because I want everybody to kind of understand where I'm coming from and what definitions of role playing that I'm operating under. And then we can talk a little bit further about that beyond that point. And you're certainly welcome to comment on each of those points or disagree with each of those points and so on. Let's see who else we have. We have Rational Ginger. Hello. Good to see you again. And as always, you guys are welcome to pop in. And I will put the link up again just in case anyone wants to jump in. So you just hit that link and you will be into the stream. So let's get all my banners first. So the first thing I want to point out as far as role playing and my definitions of role playing, and here is probably the worst level of role playing that I can think of, and I think it's a commonly held opinion as well. So role playing, player only participates when dice needed to be rolled. Yeah, we've all seen this. We've had this kind of player at our table who the only time that they feel like, you feel as a dungeon master that they're engaging is any time that they need to, roll the die. And a lot of times you have to remind them, or ask them, well, what are you going to do? This is, and if they, what do I need to roll? That kind of a thing is really an only partially engaged player at the table. I think it's the lowest form of role playing, and after a few sessions, that player might not even be useful at your table. You certainly want to break them out of that as quickly as possible. But you shouldn't have to suffer with someone being that disengaged in what the other players are doing at the table, through their characters. And, they're not even engaged in their own character at that point. So it's a very, very low bar of entry. And it's not one that I would certainly suffer with for very, very long. Hey, what's going on, Sean Terry? Good to see you again. You can pop in anytime you like. I'll let the conversation develop a little bit longer in case anyone else wants to jump in. So this is my bare minimum of what is called role playing. So role playing, bare minimum, the character fills a specific role in the group, nothing more, and the other players know nothing else about the character. So I'm playing a thief. All right, that's all my fellow players at the table know about my character. That's the only kind of role that I'm playing with my character. So the only time that I'm going to speak up is if there's something thievy that needs to be done, whether it's find or remove a lock, or pick a lock, or hear at a door, or search for traps, or that kind of thing. That's the only time that my character engages in any kind of interaction with the rest of the players. I am playing the role, all right, of the thief in the group, and so I am stepping up any time I see my role being of use in that situation, in that scene. But other than that, nothing about my character. So like I said, it's a very bare minimum. you're just filling in a niche in the requirement for, basically the four primary classes in Dungeons and Dragons, let's say. I mean, it's a little bit harder to play that kind of a, very narrow focused role in a second generation skill-based game. But with first generation games where you have character classes and very specific roles, that is still the bare minimum of play. Next up, we have the entry level role playing. All right, so now you're going just a step beyond only activating when there is a role for your character's class to participate in. Here, at least, you're role playing at an entry level where the player is describing where his character is and what his character is doing. All right, still very, very bare minimum. But they're at least, functioning beyond just their character class when they're describing where their character is located and what their character is doing. And so that's marginally, just slightly better than the bare minimum. The average base level player character, role-playing base level, plays the character in a role, but other details about the character are also known about the table, around the table. So, my thief character. You now know that I'm a halfling thief. You now know that, when I come into a situation, I'm going to do various things that are a common sequence for my character. So I'm going to, anytime I enter a room, I'm going to, check around the room, scan the room, look for any kinds of things that might require my particular skill set. I'm going to verbalize that with the rest of the party. So tell them where my character is, what my character is doing. When I observe things, I will relay that to the rest of the party as well. The rest of the party, the players are going to know about my character, possibly some of my goals, some of my interests, some of my quirks. They're going to pick up on these little things as time goes on. And so, my character in their minds now has a name, has a very basic personality, and has a just has a presence that they'll recognize. So that to me is a very base level of role playing. Let's see, we got 2 more comments in here. So RPG, hey, how's it going, man? Good to see you. I was checking to see, I wanted to pick up 5 parsecs of space or something like that from Modifius during their Black Friday sale, and it just happened to be sold out. So crap. I'll wait to see if they have another sale or if they're back in stock later on. Let's see. Anyway, most experienced player groups have an SOP. Yeah, I mean, and that is, I think they're very basic. So that's still part of the, the average that, and I will add to that, or really build on that group have an SOP. In order for a group to have an SOP, every group member has to know what the other characters are capable of. And that is unit cohesion, to use a military term. It's unit cohesion. It's a group dynamic. It's knowing what everyone's roles are, knowing when they should be used or how best to use them, and also being prepared, and this is very military, also being able to be prepared to fill in one of those roles should you lose it. So what kind of fail safes do you have? And this goes to group character development over time. When you have a very cohesive group, they'll start asking each other, and this is the players, so this is metagaming. Ask the players, hey, I'm thinking about having my character learn as a secondary skill leatherworking, and then you have a secondary skill of animal skinning. And so when we work together, we can actually start producing our own armor going down in the future. And especially if it's, if you're in a low fantasy, so low magic setting, that actually becomes a little bit more important. Then the magic user in the group says, well, I'm going to start focusing on learning how to enchant things. So now I can take the armors that you're creating and master crafting, and now I can start enchanting that master crafted item, and so on. And so you're actually working together in developing the group dynamic, and then that is going to play a role in the actual gameplay through the characters. And that always goes back to the role-playing aspect of your characters. Yeah, solo RPG, 5 parsecs from home. Oh, excuse me. 5 leagues from the borderlands. Oh, I haven't heard that. If that's also from Modiphius, I don't know. Now you got me wondering. I have fantasy solo games, so if it's a solo, then I'm going to I'll probably go with 5 parsecs from home. Parsecs. SOP, yes. Sorry, I should have explained that for everybody as well. My group, we try to balance. Myself and another player tend to role play the most, but we try not to hog the stage and let other players get more comfortable with it. Yeah, and that's very, very cool idea to do, and slowly coax them into it. Let me get back to my next. So advanced. So role-playing advanced. Role-player characters through their character's perspective. Experiences, gathered knowledge base, and history of interactions with PCs and NPCs. So here now you're starting to do that kind of unit cohesion like I was talking about, and group planning for your character's development over time. And you're thinking through, you're role-playing through your character's perspective, your character's experiences and gathered knowledge base and history of interaction with the PCs and NPCs as they're going on. This is basically what a campaign is. A campaign is a world setting along a timeline that the player characters are experiencing as they go through it, as they go through time, as they travel through and encounter new experiences, encounter new places and peoples and creatures and such. And they're constantly building up this knowledge base. And this is that exploration pillar. And part of the, one of the subsets of the argument that I'm making in this video is that you can do the 3 pillars of role-playing, of combat, exploration, and social interaction. And You can role play them out by, without encumbering them with too many dice rolls or too many rules mechanics. You can actually eliminate some of those dice rules and rule mechanics and instead envelop them into, or I should say, embed them into your characterizations, and into your character's perspective, experiences, and particularly gathered knowledge base. So the knowledge base should be constantly growing and, constantly being shared with the other characters, in the party, so that they can start saying, hey, wait a second, let me give you an example. So when my player characters engage in a scene and there was something that one of the player characters should have known from a previous, but doesn't quite remember it. The player doesn't remember that experience, but one of the other players does, and the other player was also there. Then the other player would have his character or her character talk to that character and says, hey, don't you remember when we did this? And oh yeah, that's right, we did this, months ago. And now I can alter the scene to reflect their remembered knowledge of it and give them a little bit more information, because now they have expressed it through their character's perspective and from their knowledge base what was remembered. If a player knows something about it that their characters did not experience, I won't give them that added hint or that more information from the scene, because the character doesn't know it, and the collective group of characters doesn't know it. There is a separation, certainly in my game, and I would argue that this is an advanced level of role playing when you're, as the DM or GM, not allowing the players to bring their knowledge of the game system or of the world setting that you might be playing in, to their characters, without some support, without some, well, my character did experience this, and that's why, I like to keep player characters where a very limited backstory, in that they aren't going to come with this huge wealth of information that happened before they actually started adventuring in the current campaign. Hello, Zaddy Rock. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Good evening. Oh, excuse me. Oh my gosh. Yes, I am day one into my COVID quarantine, so first time I've ever had it, and it's starting to give me a little bit of a cough. I've already had a nasal infection leading into this, so I don't know what is what. But anyway, it is good to see you. I don't recognize your name, so if you are a new viewer, welcome, and feel free to jump in if you wish. And we will. I will put up the link if you wish to enter the chat and actually participate in the chat at any point. You're welcome to. We are talking about, for any latecomers, we are talking about role-playing, and I am going to connect that up to the 3 pillars and talk about genuine role-playing, not just the art of rolling dice, or that's actually not even an art, but the mechanic of rolling dice, and then getting into the higher levels of actual immersive role playing your characters, in scenes that are looking to limit the number of instances where you're talking in game mechanics while at the table. So, well, thank you, Solo RPG Guy. But yeah, I mean, hey, if you're watching it and you like what you like, you like what you're hearing, please feel welcome to, hit that like button. And if you don't like what you're hearing, then please feel free to put up a comment there and say, hey, you know what? I disagree with what you just said, and we'll discuss it, because this is a discussion, open discussion, and welcome to, join in and participate in any means you wish to. I do not have a thin skin, so I can be disagreed with and still hold a conversation. So let's see. We are going to go to. So that was. I'll go back to advanced part 1, and so advanced part 1. Players role play their characters through their characters' perspective experiences, gathered knowledge base and history of interactions with PCs and NPCs. Part 2, I actually verbalized this. Part 2 of that is that players are able to separate player from character, even able to have out-of-character banter and still maintain immersion in what is going on with their characters. I'm going to have to do a little cough medicine. Now, I know this was something that I had a discussion with Shoner over at Shoner Films, or Roll with Insanity, or whatever you can find him under a number of things. And I think that we talked about the idea of immersion and character banter, or out of character banter. And in my opinion, and it's been in my experience too, that you could, like in my group. So my AD&D First Edition group of 8 players. We've been playing now for like 68 weeks consecutively, with really only one break during the summertime. And so when we get together, everyone knows each other's characters very, very well. Everyone, we all get along really great. We're happy when everybody shows up. Virtually everybody shows up every time, so we have very few people who don't make it very, very, very often. I'm saying it's like once in a blue moon, so somebody will miss. We run about 3 to 3.5 hour sessions. So at any time when we take a little break, we get right back into the session, right back into the role playing, right back into the immersive experience. Sometimes things happen that are just funny, and we'll bust out laughing, and we come out of character and play around with it a little bit, and then we jump right back into it again. And I don't think that is as disruptive to the role-playing experience than someone else might, believe. I think that comes, your ability to shift in and out of character and still kind of maintain a flow and maintain that immersive experience, as long as it doesn't happen too often. I think with experience, you can kind of learn to transition very quickly, like that. Now, that might be from my own professional experience as a, as a school teacher. And, a lot of times you had to, once you picked up that the class, my class of students weren't quite getting where I was, what I was trying to teach them about a particular topic, I'd have to shift gears and present it a different way in order to, individualize that without kind of losing everybody else's attention. So that's, partly why maybe I don't have as much of a problem with shifting gears. The other thing is, I'm also a military veteran, and in the military, I can speak about the U.S. Army. We change shit all the time. I mean, it was, we used to call it Change 99. Just the, your orders, your mission objectives were very dynamic. Sometimes they did that on purpose just to keep you on your toes. Other times it was just, the changing situation, the environment. And you had to make those, very rapid shifts in what you were planning on doing. And so, you can carry, that, and I think I carry partly that, more classroom experience than that, into a gaming situation where you can kind of deal with that back and forth. And banter, holy crap. Banter in the military is, is about as unfocused from what you're actually looking to do in a majority of the situations than, and very, very spontaneous as well. So it doesn't throw me off my game. And I think that it's a level of advancement in role playing that you're able to make those, somewhat rare breaks from the action and still not lose the immersion. Let's see, let me get caught up with these. Hey, Shoner. And let's see. You're not the only person that says that, but I'm sure that there are others that also have that opinion that you can't shift back and forth between the two. Let's say, I agree. Having fun with friends is the big part of winning at D&D. There's no winning at D&D. I know there's some people that'll say that too. Well, you can. There's no winning at D&D. There's no losing at D&D. There is just experiencing, any RPG. It's about the experience at the table. But if you consider you're all sitting at a table with your friends, and it could be virtual too. I no longer hold on to that idea that, the only way to play this is or any RPG is in person and around the table and everything. We have to advance, with where the technology is and the situations that we're in. We have to advance forward with that. If you're saying, well, winning is the fact that you're engaged in a social interaction of playing a game and role playing and just having a general good time, then yes, that is winning. And it's separate from the game mechanics taking place. So there I would absolutely agree with you, Ajax, is that, if you are, that's a true measure of whether or not your gaming experience is a positive one. Is everyone enjoying the company at the table? Is everyone having a in its aggregate, overall having a good time. Are you having a good time when your character dies? No, you probably not. But if you properly role play that out, I think that you can, and you're in a long, continuous campaign, that could lead to a new story. There's ways that your character death can reverberate through the timeline of events yet to unfold that still plays a part in the story moving forward. And the story moving forward is the character group in the world setting on that timeline, in that campaign. All right. And when you put a character death in that kind of context, then losing a character should not be an issue for the player, because they know, they trust that you can, that you as the DM are going to somehow incorporate that character's story into what's coming forward. Excuse me. And it becomes much easier. Well, having fun with friends is a big part of winning. Getting teeth thrilled together at a death. No, I mean, having fun with friends is a big part of winning. Getting teeth drilled together at the dentist. Are you making a comparison between the two? I love my game to have players cheer each other on, share fails, plan moves, etc. In or out of character. I am not producing a theater event. Yeah, it's not a theater event, but I think that there should be a flow of in-character role playing that really does set the tone and the atmosphere of the scene, without getting bogged down, I think, or fractured with many different out of character conversation taking place. Planning, the player characters even planning amongst themselves for a long time. And what I mean in a long time is like, you as a DM, if you're experienced, you start thinking to yourself, all right, they're overthinking this. Darn well they're overthinking it. And it's like, all right, how do I get my players to have their characters stop overthinking this situation, and you start giving these gentle, silent cues that things are, starting to take too long to move along. I'm trying to, because it really did come up in my last session, and one of my players was actually like, I think that he probably heard me rolling the dice, and that's something I do once in a while. I'll start just making nonsensical rolls, and I'll be like, all right, the TM's rolling crap. He's not saying anything anymore. I think we're overthinking this, and we're taking too much time, and something bad is going to happen if we just gotta stick and move, and and move this along, because something bad will happen, and mechanically, without you actually having to do anything, you could have the players lose initiative, because they're just spending too much time, or losing action during that particular round because they're so indecisive. And that is altering the scene in a cinematic way, rather than rolling a die to determine it. You're just judging the scene based on how it appears, as if it was a scene in a TV show, like a TV episode. I mean, imagine if you're watching an episode and one of the characters is just like indecisive and just sitting there overthinking it, talking to themselves and saying, well, maybe if I do this or do that, and within that scene in a television episode, what they're going to do is they're going to have that indecisiveness play out as a negative consequence in the scene, and you do that as well as a GM. And once you've done that a few times, your players are going to learn, no, we must be much more decisive than this. We can't overthink these things. We can't dilly-dally. We can't get bogged down out of character and looking through rule books to say, oh, well, wait a second, there's another spell that I as a player know about that, I'm flipping through this thing. And that is that is the kind of delay in the game that in your game session that you really don't want to encourage. Let's see. In an odd way, I agree with Ajax. That's the only way folks win at the table. Well, yeah, having fun, and enjoying each other's company, yes. Like I said, if everybody's sitting there and they're upset and disgruntled and they don't like the flow of the session and they don't like, the tone of the session and everything, that's not a success. Really apologize for the coughing. I've been able to go probably about 35 minutes. This much talking. Most people confuse role-playing with acting. Yeah, it's not both. Like I said, I don't expect voice acting. So that's not what role-playing I'm actually looking for. I'm looking for this is what my character is doing. This is what my character is saying. This is where my character is at. I'm going to, when the player says I am, I always assume they're talking about their character. All right. But they could say their character's name. So let's say my character's name is Talbot. Talbot tells Curtis, the magic user, stand aside. I am going to check for traps on that chest before you touch it. All right, and goes over there and then does that action. There's a way to just put it into the character's terms rather than, and then when they get up there and they go to the box, the chest or whatever, and they say, I rolled a 37. And that unlocks the I as a DM can see your roll. All right. I as a DM knows whether or not that's a successful roll or not, because I can either see it on your character sheet or kind of have a little cheat sheet next to me, or we're using a virtual tabletop that will indicate to me whether or not your find traps was a success or not. And that's part of role playing that I think that many of us should try to move towards, is eliminating the talk about the game mechanics, and so on. So that, I think that is a much more immersive way of role playing. Is it theater? No, I don't think that's theater per se, because every once in a while you have to break out of that, to, especially as a DM. I don't see how a DM can completely function without pointing out a game mechanic here or there. Like to, when a player tries to do something that is clearly impossible. When you say, "Oh, that's going," when you try to describe it and you make it clear that it's impossible, you've kind of tipped off that, the game mechanics wise, it's not a possible feat. I don't know. It's kind of strange. I think it's very hard to eliminate all game mechanics discussion during a game session. So it's I think it's got to be a mix, and I know someone mentioned earlier on that it is a mix, or at least they try to run their table as a mix, and I absolutely agree with that. Funny scenes are out of course going to make players laugh. I would hope that the characters in the game have a sense of humor. Well, yeah, yes, the characters should express that same kind of thing. Now, it's kind of hard that, like, my players will laugh when they fumbled and one of their own players chopped off two of his own fingers. That's something that the players laughed about, but the characters aren't going to be laughed about. Talk about breaking out of character. They won't be laughing about that, but the players certainly did. There were a number of scenes where, my player characters, in the group, they fumbled, and one did like a face plant into like a fungus patch. The momentum of his sword swing just carried him over, and he was at the edge of the thing, and he literally face planted into this stuff, and it was like all kinds of nastiness inside that patch as well, and maybe the other characters would have laughed at that, and that would have been more in character for them to have done so. But yeah, my players will laugh at like serious injuries and be like, wow, that was, pretty funny stuff. They laugh about their long string of failed rolls that I don't think that the player characters would actually do. Like, oh crap, we just lost initiative 6 times in a row. The players are laughing about it, but the characters wouldn't, and the characters wouldn't even mention, hey, we just lost 6 initiative rolls in a row. They have no concept that there's an initiative taking place. So yeah, yes, but I think that you can disconnect for momentary lapses of laughter and still get re-immersed into the scene without delay. Agreed, Aman. It's not proper theater. And no, it's not a proper theater production. Yeah, I'm not quite losing my voice. I'm just losing the ability not to cough. But we'll see. if I wasn't on so much medication, I would probably do a shot of rum, and that would clear it up right away. But anyway, so the worst thing, in my opinion, that bogs down the game is the player-to-player interaction that is not organic, but rather done by players thinking it is expected of them. I'm trying to think of an instance of that. Expected from whom? From the DM. I think the thing that bogs down role-playing is, and on the player-to-player interaction, I'd rather have character-to-character interaction, first of all. So character-to-character interaction, I guess just when they get bogged down with not knowing where to go with their next step, overthinking things. And, at one point very early on in my campaign, I'd say this was probably around like week 5 or 6, I said to them, you guys are engaged in a heroic fantasy. Be bold. I will never overly punish you for being bold. Hesitancy will lead to loss of initiative or loss of an action, or it will have other potential consequences that being bold might not carry with it. I mean, now there's a difference between being bold and being foolhardy, and an experienced group will also learn the differences between those as well. But I think over time, they'll hit the proper balance between boldness and caution more often than not. And so to Arnman's, comment, I mean, if you're talking about players telling other players how to run their characters or how they should be running their characters, that kind of out of character discussion is almost like rules lawyering, right? Or busting out a rule book and start looking through the rule book to see, oh, well, this is what your character should be doing, or this is what my character should have done or is going to do the next time. That is something that I think is disruptive of the interaction, disruptive of the smoothness of the scene. But I don't quite. Hopefully, you'll clear that up. I don't know where you're going with it. Do you sometimes have a secret? Most players like finding traps, secret doors, so that they don't know how good or bad the roll was. I don't have a secret roll, but I do have secret modifiers, which are called the difficulty modifiers to certain things, so that when their dice roll actually tell them like, hey, I succeeded, but the lock was secretly a much more complex device than they needed, and I added an extra 10% to it, let's say, that they needed to in order to succeed. They'll think like, hey, I succeeded, and I says, well, as you were, turning the keys to unlock or the picks to unlock the lock, you heard the first tumbler click and the second tumbler click, and the third one just jittered a slight bit, and then it reset. All right. Yes, they thought they succeeded because they made their roll, but now they've realized that the lock is much more intricate than they anticipated. So that's one way that you can role play, narratively describe a failure that they believed should have been a success based on their role. And you can do that instantly because you see their role. You know that their expectation is that the role was a success, and then you explain why it wasn't, narratively, and descriptively, rather than saying, no, you actually had a -10, -10 chance to unlock that. You don't have to deal with the numbers. So I hope that kind of answers that question. Yeah, I do secret roles, usually just for surprise. And then, like I said, I do secret modifiers to their roles, to add certain twists to things and make it a little bit more interesting. And so we go. I do that at times. Yeah, I think everybody does. Hey, 28 millimeter RPG, how's it going? Good to see you in here. Let's move on to, I use Foundry VTT and all the players roll blind DM rolls for such thing. I do all my attack rolls as a DM. I do all of my attack rolls in plain view, including damage rolls and everything they see, because again, I don't want to talk about numbers. I want to describe narratively what is happening. And so the players will see my rolls. So they know right away when I've rolled a critical hit. They've known right away when I roll a damage, and how much damage it actually dealt with. And then, they respond with any rolls they might have to do, like a saving throw or something like that. But again, we try to eliminate the talk about rolling and the results of rolls. We like to do it visually and then narratively describe it. So yeah, I don't do, other than surprise, I don't do very many. There's wandering monster events and those kinds of things. That's done secretly as well. Yeah, I just don't like to do anything that the players should know secretly. Occasionally I roll dice just to let them hear me rolling dice, to move them along. So I do fake rolls. Please drink. Yes, I'm working on it. Yeah, it's like I said, if I wasn't on antibiotics, I'd be doing a shot of rum. That would certainly clear me up. Yeah, water. I stopped using everything in VTT. Just simple player sheets, dice, and a few images. Mostly theater of the brain. Yeah, and I like it as well. The only thing I really do on the VTT is I use a blank graph sheet and put the player character icons on there, just so we can kind of see the positioning and everything. When we do actual dungeon crawls, then I will lay down the map and then reveal it with the fog of war kind of thing, and reveal it as they go through it. And then they kind of have their marching order on a separate sheet. And we deal with the combats within the confines of that room. I don't fully utilize everything on the map. So the map is there as a visual, and then the theater of the mind takes place on a separate white sheet where we can move the icons and do the various things there. Roll20 still has a very broken system of dynamic lighting that I don't think works very well. So let's see. Let me get caught up on some of these. See, actually, I'm pretty close. Yeah, tea and lemon, I know, and honey is good. Mindscape, yeah, unless that's an app, um, which this possibly gives me Mindscapes. Is that an app? That stuff gets decided before starting a game. Oh, whether you're doing theater of the mind or whatever. Yes. Yeah, that does. I think it in my game it kind of evolved more. So when you're playing a very long campaign, you've got a lot of people involved with it. Um, you start seeing what everyone is capable of doing, and you alter kind of. I think you move more towards theater of the mind when you realize that you're playing with intelligent, engaged, individuals who kind of know what they're doing, and so it's very, very helpful. Night all. Thanks for the stream. I'd stay, but I need to go to bed. Well, thanks for being here, Rational Ginger. Good to see you. Hope you had a great holiday if you were in the States and you had your Thanksgiving. And be on the lookout for some sales. What Monday, isn't it? Cyber Monday. So hopefully there'll be some good stuff on there. Cyber Monday. All right. And a good night wish from RPG Soul. Hey, we got a. Thank you very much, Harry Shore. It's the first time I've seen you. I think if this is your first time here, pleasure having you here, and thanks for the $2 blessing. I will use that to buy another bottle of Robitussin to get me through this. Youngster, I don't know. You must be much older than I if I'm a youngster, but I appreciate it. So thanks for stopping in, and please feel free to continue, and you can jump in if you wish. I forgot to put this up there. If anybody wants to jump in the stream, you're welcome to do so. And say, I use plastic sheet with a China marker for maps. Yeah, I mean, I exclusively play, virtually online at this point. I don't think that there are very many. I don't think that there are very many people who, in my area, that actually play in person. I've gone to my local gaming store, and it's usually Magic the Gathering and nothing else but. And that's kind of the situation. If they do play D&D, they're playing 5e only, and that's only on specific nights, and not even that often. And my local gaming shops have closed down. They never made it through. COVID and the shutdown. So, but anyway, yeah, that's a cool way of doing it with China marker for maps. I don't know what a China marker is. I guess it's like a dry erase, I suppose. Love Castles and Crusades. I'm a bit jealous of anyone playing it. Ajax, you can always jump in. I have a Tuesday morning game. Well, it's an 11:30 a.m. Eastern time game running. We're trying to get it to run, and if that's a time slot that works for you, you're certainly welcome to join. I have it opened up for at least 2 or 3 more players. I'd like to get. I think it's open for 3 more players. So yeah, if you want to join, I'm just trying to launch a new campaign, and that we've only done like 1 or 2 little things there. Some sessions, but we're trying to get it up and running. All my fault that it's not a consistent, cohesive campaign just yet. or 1946. All right, so you are 21 years older than me. So I'll take youngster from you. Thank you very much, sir. And we go here. Do you think Theater of the Mind has a faster pace in gaming than maps and minis and figures? If you're of sound mind, sure. If you're indecisive and your players are indecisive, then Theater of the Mind, I think, might actually be slower. You really need, some players need that tactile, visual in front of them, and especially when they're trying to put their characters into a location and know how that relates to the other, players here and the, player characters in the group as well. So I think Theater of the Mind might, could under certain circumstances be slower. Maps and minis or figures are tools, and I know people have argued, at least one person has kind of got off hinge on the fact that, people have referred to them as tools, but they're tools, they're manipulatives. They're tools meant to streamline and help put in proper context the Theater of the Mind. So I don't think that Theater of the Mind requires the total lack of materials, visual materials in front of you. Sometimes I think they both enhance each other to an extent. So yeah, I don't think that I don't think that they're counterintuitive to each other. If that makes any sense. Let me see where I was at with my banners. So I was going to get into, I'll put up this other banner. So 3 pillars, rules, light, and role playing. So the 3 pillars of role playing is, is obviously it's combat, exploration, and social interaction, or interaction in general. Now, it's the 3 pillars of role playing. I want to make that very clear. It's not the 3 pillars of Dungeons and Dragons, because I think it was much more universally understood that all role playing games have these three pillars to them. Whenever we're engaging in a role playing game, you have combat in almost every instance. I'd say 95+% of role-playing games out there have some element of combat to them. Exploration, I purposefully expand that definition, I believe, for it's not just the physical, geographic, topographic exploration of new places for the characters to experience, but its exploration is also the acquisition and growth of a knowledge base is also exploration. You're exploring new ideas. You're exploring new knowledge, knowledge-based materials that your character is, learning about as they go about their adventuring. So the exploration pillar is something that takes place in every session, regardless of whether you're intending to or not, because the characters are constantly gaining a new knowledge base from their experiences. So that to me is the exploration pillar. And then plus they're also gaining, geography and such. So, and an understanding of the world and how it works as well. Then there's the interaction pillar, which sometimes it's called the social interaction pillar. And again, you do not need complex rules mechanics for social interaction. If you do, you're not role playing, number one. You're not putting yourself into your player characters or your character's perspective. You're not experiencing true character growth. If you have to rely on a rules mechanic to govern that, I mean, to me, that is just a total disconnect from what the pillar is meant to be. I've had this argument quite a number of times with another channel, another individual who believes that you never truly had social interaction until the rules mechanics were put into Strixhaven. And to me, it's like everything that I view 5e doing for the last 2 years or so has been adding training wheels and crutches to the 3 pillars and actually engaging in the 3 pillars of our role playing. And so it's a dumbing down of the pillars to make it more manageable for people who aren't, for players who are not fully engaging in the art of role playing. Once you reduce it to dice rolls, and that is going to determine your outcomes for social interaction, you are no longer role playing. All right, you are ROLL playing. Back to that very, that very lowest form of participation in the game, and it's a form that would not be welcome. Certainly at my table, would not be welcome for very, very long at all. It would be, something that it was like, hey, you got to do more than this. You might not last more than 3 sessions functioning at just that level, because it's a waste of time for everybody. If you're like, well, I got to see based on this chart how my character is going to react to this interaction that my character just had with the other player's character. It was like, what? You don't need rules for that. You're just going to talk about it. Your character is going to, have this conversation with this other PC or with this NPC, and then I, as the DM, I'm not going to resort to looking at some chart to determine that. Based on what you say and what you describe and what I believe you intended to, I am then going to narratively role play that NPC based on a reaction that I think is a reasonable reaction to what your character has said. And that's it. All right. I don't need dice rolls to do that. I don't need, to me, that is just an over-reliance on rules to tell you how to play your character. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think that is such a low bar that it's not an adequate level of role playing, in my opinion. Oh yeah, so I got that already. Sorry about that. Castles and Crusades, a bit jealous of anyone. Oh, let me get caught up here. Here we go. And Theater of the Mind was like complete without any kind of visuals or anything else, Squirrel. Um, I mean, sure, it could be done. And if I, I don't know. Yeah, without visuals, so correct. Without visuals, is do you think that using visuals? So I'm going to ask you now a question. Do you think that using visuals would have bogged it down, or would it have, potentially enhanced it? Or I mean, that's the only question I would have is, if you believe that it would have bogged it down, or it has bogged it down in the past. Um, there was a map pass on. That's it. It's still a visual. That's what I'm still, talking about. Again, I am only virtual. I am not in person, and I mean, as long as like if everybody had a visual and so they could kind of see and and talk about where their character is in relation of the map. If I'm a person, I would still like. So the most recent in-person game I played was at a con. So Shire Con back in October, and in one instance, he used a map, and we had character pieces, miniatures, on the table, and so on. And so there, it was very easy to visualize, obviously, because we had everything laid out, with us. It wasn't just a map; it was actually a bunch of homemade um, table constructs, for lack of a better, I can't think of the better word for it. Um, and so it was set pieces, let's say. And then the second game was completely theater of the mind. We had our character sheets and nothing else. There was no maps at all, and there was no miniatures that we used at the table, and so that was completely theater of the mind. Both, I guess, seemed to go well. For me, I thought using the figures and just being able to, you didn't have to talk about where your character was in the room. Everybody could see it. And so to me, that made it actually run a lot smoother than if it was strictly theater of the mind. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I do. I try to encourage my players, and sometimes I need reminders as well. Sometimes I fall into talking about numbers too. I am certainly not I'm certainly not an infallible expert at doing this. I am still trying to improve my GMing, and still trying to incorporate better practices even after GMing for probably over 25 years now. um, Not continuous, but you know over 25 years overall, and playing role-playing games probably for about 35 years. um, Even though I go all the way back to 77 or 78 when I first started playing, I did have a long gap in between that I wasn't doing tabletop role playing. But yeah, I mean, I am still learning as I go, this being my seventh year in the modern era of just GMing, pretty much nonstop for the last 7 years on a weekly basis. So No, we use miniatures and terrain maps sometimes. Just depends on the time and I have able to prepare them, run them. I mean, some things are, sometimes you don't have to use maps. I mean, there are sessions that I go through where we're not really using the map. I mean, other than we're using just a visual of the player characters on the white sheet and nothing more. Those are usually game sessions where we have no combat and it's all interaction. And we've had a few of those. I wouldn't say that that's, I want to try to put a number to it, like percentage wise. So we've done 68 sessions and maybe 10 had no combat in them whatsoever, maybe even more, maybe slightly more. There's always some level of combat, but not, I'd say 80% of the time there's combat, just to put a kind of a number on it. And then you have to use, in my opinion, you have to use maps and terrain and, or at least character counters to see where everybody is at. Yeah, if you're mindscaping, if you're doing theater of the mind, totally, you're not using maps or minis. Games run much faster. Well, I that's only if the players are not visually dependent. If some players are visually dependent, or I certainly don't see them as, if you were using maps and minis, how does that slow the thought process down? Because the action of actually moving pieces on a map is not that time consuming. So I don't know where the argument could come from that it's both or neither. It's I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think that you can honestly say theater of the mind is much faster, or using maps and minis automatically makes it much slower. I think that it really depends on when certain tools are going to enhance both the pace and the experience of the session, which I think Squirrel Hermit kind of brought up, in a way with his comments when he was talking about, he's done a mix of both. Yes. Yeah, and that's the one thing I've heard about, and I don't bring that up as much as persuasion, intimidation, insight. How about perspective? Perception rolls. Like you walk into a room and you roll, every time you walk into a room, you're rolling a perception roll. And then you say, well, what does my character see? No, what is your character looking at? What is the character focusing on? I've never understood this mechanic. I think the mechanic of perception is completely low bar, in my opinion. It's just the DM revealing things to players because they made it a perception roll, instead of them actually saying, well, this is what my character is, where my character is, what my character is doing, and then the DM, knowing that information, then can feed that player character in like what they can actually see from that vantage point. What can they see from from what they've stated they're looking at, and what they experience based on what they're attempting to do. Yeah, I don't do those perception checks when they look, and the players have to be much more proactive in saying what their characters are doing before I allow them to gain character knowledge of the experience, and not player knowledge of the scene that's been set. Yes, the answer is not on your character sheet, right? It's and that's why I think the simpler the system of character sheet and character action is a better system for role playing, because it forces the player away from role playing, ROLL, and moves them more towards, well, how am I going to make my character interesting and more of a role playing device than just a character sheet with a bunch of dice mechanics attached to it. I've often said that, like the older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, since we kind of focus on Dungeons and Dragons for this discussion. One of the things I like about the older systems is that, you have that flexibility off of your character sheet, that, modern day thinking about Dungeons and Dragons 5e in particular. And I think it was fairly common in 4e as well, the character build kind of mentality, which is a computer RPG mentality, and really an MMO mentality, is the whole idea of optimized character builds. And so you see that when you're talking about, well, this is what the character sheet, says, and this is how I'm going to function off of that. And I said, in AD&D First Edition, I could take a fighter and I can double specialize in dagger, and then try to import that same concept into a 5e system, 5e table. And everybody like, what? Why would you do that? Why would a fighter double specialize in in dagger? I mean, it's the least optimal melee weapon that a fighter could possibly want to use. I'm doing it for the purposes of role playing. All right, I'm not doing it because it's optimized. I'm doing it because this is my character concept, and this is what he chose to train in. And so you run into that character sheet versus role playing issue. Yes, role playing solves everything except for the consequences of combat. It's the only place where I think that dice rolls are still required, because no one is going to role play their character's death if that's not what the game mechanics called for. They will role play the consequence of their character's death or the moment of their character's death. But very few players are going to say, well, I am going to choose to role play my character dying, regardless of what the dice roll actually say. So, but role playing, you can mask all dice rolls with role playing. That's my argument. It doesn't take that long, Shauner, to move a character 9 squares. I mean, it literally takes seconds to move a character 9 squares. We're not doing mass combat here. I'm not talking about mass combat. All right, I'm talking about, a group of, 4 or 5, even 8 characters on the board, on the map, and their movement is for each of them only taking moments. Probably less real time than it would take you to move an equal number of squares. I guess it's like, I don't know about your mobility. I can move a character piece the equivalent of 120 yards in a wilderness environment that I could walk myself. That's for damn sure. So that's, I disagree. I think the speed movement, the game goes at the speed of the minis movement on the board, which is slow. No, I think mini movement on the board is very fast. Yeah, you use props, yeah, Cal. And props and handouts and stuff like that. I mean, let's break away from D&D for a moment. I mean, think about the props and handouts that were in James Bond 007 RPG. The props and handouts for those things were awesome. They really brought to you that immersion to the game session that you wouldn't have had without those props and handouts. Think about Call of Cthulhu. You got the actual newspaper, and you saw the actual newspaper from the time, or an article from the time, and various other props that they used in that game as well. Really did capture the the essence of the game by having those particular handouts and props and such. So yeah, I'd say definitely a bonus to having some handouts and visuals of the game's pace. Okay. I know it's kind of hard, like 28 millimeter, to hear you talking about not using maps and tokens. Considering, I guess you like miniatures though, so yeah, I still don't. I will try to envision thinking about how that would slow down the game session. Maybe try to do some practice runs of it and see how it moves faster or slower based on it. Yes, when Ajax, when there are a lot of layers to character action, I find that really does slow down the pace. That's what increases that. Shauna and I had a discussion about this prior to the live stream, and I said that in my experience, I've never had, and this is kind of like a cliche that's thrown out there, where it's like, oh, in in Dungeons and Dragons, you could have a 3 round combat last 45 minutes, and I have never experienced that whatsoever in old school, D&D. I mean, I've had 11 round sessions, 11 combat round battle take place with 8 players, 8 player characters, and a slew of NPCs and a boss NPC. I believe that was a battle with a white dragon, lasted 11 rounds, or possibly a possibly the demon that I had them fighting with a bunch of minions kind of going around. Maybe the white dragon battle was like 9 rounds, and that demon battle was like 11 rounds, but neither lasted in real time more than 45 minutes. And now I will credit my players for the smoothness of their action and their interaction within the scene, and so it was very fast paced. They knew exactly what they were intending to do. They communicated very well, and we used all of the tools of the virtual tabletop to minimize the number of roles, separate roles that would have been required if we weren't using, that tabletop. But you could do many of those minimizations to rolling, such as you roll your to hit die, your d20, and your damage die at the same time. Doesn't matter if you hit or miss. As far as the damage die is rolled, it just reduces the amount of rolling you're doing. You're doing it all in one shot, and now you can see that this is these are the consequences of the roll. The thing that the virtual tabletop eliminates is the need to look at the chart, the 2-hit chart, because it embeds that automatically in the calculation of the roll on the screen. So we can all see whether or not it hit armor class. I know the armor class that it hit. And so that kind of sorts that out as well, instantly. And then, I spoke with him about, it'll even tell you the quality of the roll by color coding it. So if it's a natural 20, it comes up as a green. Even if it's like a 26, I know that it's green, so I know that it was a natural 20. If it's red and it's like a 5, I know that the natural roll was actually a 1, and it was a fumble. And so, and the players obviously know this as well, because they can all see it on the screen. So it allows us to move away from talking about the rolls, and it's still a crunchy system, but the way it's been packaged and delivered makes it less of a hindrance, because you can instantly visually pick up on what's actually taking place, and then you go right into describing narratively what the outcomes were. Yeah, I use one initiative roll for the character that it makes the most sense to make the party initiative roll. So yeah, I don't do individualized initiative. I use party initiative, and that's for both NPCs and and the player characters. I know that some arguments have been to be remove initiative completely, and I would have a problem with that, because in my experience, I've had too many instances in my recent gaming where initiative made the difference between the party success and potentially a full party wipe. And the players understood that because they could see it was like, crap, we can see visually everything that's going on. And damn, if we don't win this initiative roll, this could really take a turn. And there was still in character talking about, I mean, they weren't mentioning initiative, but, you know, if we don't hit them next, that's how you eliminate the terminology initiative. Be prepared. This could turn to shit real fast. And so I've had too many instances where not rolling initiative and me just deciding what's going to happen, I think that it puts me in a position where I'm deciding technically the outcome, and not letting the dice be the neutral arbiter of outcome, rather than and then me taking fiat in in changing the outcome to something more. It's always going to be something more beneficial to the players because I'm not an adversarial DM. So it's, yeah, I can see the point of having group initiative and definitely see the point in having the player with the character in the most appropriate position to make that initiative roll. When I say most appropriate, I mean the one that makes the most sense for them to be the one rolling the initiative. So my default is not whoever has the +3 initiative modifier. No, it's who is in the situation that would be the first one to respond. You could kind of split the difference and say, well, whichever player declares their character action first is the one that is going to roll initiative. That I could see doing, where calling out their declaring their action first is the one that's going to make the initiative roll. I could see doing that. I guess so. That's going back to my role-playing the character death. I didn't know. I didn't. You could role-play your death throws. Maybe you can role-play your death throws. Let's see. One of the reasons role-playing got so popular is because of dumbing down. I agree. But it's also because the poor DMs who don't understand how to role-play to begin with. Yeah, and welcome, Ron Howard. They're afraid to. That's what I really think it is. They're afraid to, or lack the confidence in rulings over rules. And having rulings over rules, they don't want to. I guess put the players in a situation where their characters can fail, and so they give them multiple opportunities to bail themselves out with multiple layers of action mechanics and multiple saving throws when they do potentially die, and multiple ways to bring their characters back if they do miraculously, by some means, 3 bad rolls in a row, die. And it's all, like I said, it's all training wheels and crutches built into modern D&D in particular. I don't know of any other game system that's the equivalent genre, same genre, high fantasy, action role-playing game, which means it has a combat focus that doesn't, or that does have the same number of layers and fail safes built into it as 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons has. And where 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons was in 2015 and where it is now, or post like 2019, I believe, is, they are very, very different games as well. But the seeds for that easy mode role-playing game experience was in 5e core rule books, but they've only managed to become much worse as time has gone on. If a mini doesn't move on the board for 45 minutes, something is wrong with the game session. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know anybody who does that, though. I mean, I've never seen minis back in the past, as kids playing, teenagers playing, through high school. I've never seen it done in modern gaming. So post 2015 forward, I don't see it in virtual. I don't see it in live plays where they're using minis. And, when is there ever an instance? I've never seen an instance where someone using miniatures, their miniatures are not moving. It's, it happens a lot. So I would agree that if someone's minis are sitting there for 45 minutes and they haven't moved, that's not something that I would, unless you're at a tavern and you're all sitting at the table eating for 45 minutes, then it's reasonable. But even then, I would have various NPCs in that room that, if I'm using miniatures, moving about the room. It doesn't make sense that everything in that room is going to be stagnant for 45 minutes. I don't think that my own players would have their characters sit there for 45 minutes. They have the role playing in them to have their character maybe sit there for, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Well, I'm going to get up and walk to this side of the room and see what I can hear in the conversations going on. They're going to interact with the room beyond that, and might only spend, a much briefer time actually sitting at the table and eating and drinking and such. So they might alternate. They might not all be wandering all over the place, but they would almost like take turns moving about the room and such, and interact with it. But again, as I say, I am blessed with some of the best, role-playing game players that I have encountered in all of my years of playing the games. So, that's a plus, and that's why some of these hard and fast rules, or just what others might consider to be best practices, I can be much more flexible with, and that's because we never lose the immersion for too long. can easily slip right back into it again. If we do have interruptions, and and we just don't have that sense of the game being slow. That's never anything that I've encountered or seen, especially not by using miniatures. The gain in speed when not using maps is you don't have to take time to set up the map. Drag out all the tokens. Someone's roll doesn't work on a VTT, then it's a 5-minute conversation about that. Yes, the VTT, sometimes when it glitches out, it's a pain. Yes, that does delay things. It's like, the technical difficulty of dealing with that is sometimes, a hassle. And that's why I kind of minimize my reliance on all of the features of the VTT, because sometimes using it with less of its features actually improves the smoothness of that situation. There's one thing on Roll20 that that occasionally happens, where all of a sudden, someone will start rolling 1, 1, 1, 1, and then I'll tell them after like the third one in a row, I was like, listen, just roll that die again. And if it comes up fourth time a 1, then hit refresh. All right, and make one roll, one more roll to see. And then if the refresh fixes it, that's usually what it takes, is it does get that glitch in it, and then I'll let them roll the die one more time. And we go from there. It's usually not the case, so it happens, I think, less often than it used to. So I'll have to take a look at one of Bruce's game sessions and see how long it takes for a game session to run. So I will definitely double check that and see. I thought most of Bruce's videos are painting videos. So otherwise, I'll take a look at one of his game sessions. I think he is running a stream of game sessions, so I'll definitely check that out. Maybe I'll get a reference of how slow it's going. And maybe it's just the players are moving slowly, moving their character slowly, or being indecisive and that kind of thing. Or maybe there's just too many moving parts. We'll see. I'll take a look. I do group initiative, and in a tie, anyone with dex bonus acts first, then everyone else goes simultaneously. Yeah, I do. I do group initiative. Anyone with a dex bonus acts first. But do you have the person with the highest dex bonus roll the die for group initiative? Or is it, if in a tie, then the person with, I see what you're saying. So in a tie, then the person with the highest dex bonus moves first. Then, all right. Yeah, I get that. thanks a lot for joining, Squirrel. Have a good night. And yeah, as I said, I wasn't expecting this to go a full 2 hours, but glad to have you come. I'm glad that my coughing has settled down a little bit since my little spat over there. I am going to wrap this up fairly soon, and I never got around to the other part I was going to do. I'll save that for a separate video of talking about the Dungeons and Dragons movie, and it did have some connection to this, but I'll bring that up during the video tomorrow separately for this as well. So I am going to I'm going to try to wrap this up by the 2 hour mark exactly. Call them game styles. Yeah, I mean, yes, they're different game styles. They're different ways of running the game, and there's whatever works best at your table with your current group of players is how you're going to run your game. I mean, and I would just expect that after a long-term campaign, you're going to find that your players start to evolve into different kind of players, and you might have to change your game style to match up better with where they're moving forward to. For me, the role-playing experience is something that over a long period of time is going to change the way you run the game. You're going to modify it to match with the style that evolves from that long campaign. If you're doing short campaigns and you're doing or exclusively one-shots, then you're going to run your game style is going to be very different from someone who runs long campaigns. So that's a difference. We really didn't get into that, and we're certainly not going to, in the last 3 or so minutes of this live stream. That's like a totally different discussion that we can certainly have. Is what are different models of or game styles used in different types of gaming situations, whether it be one shots or campaign, one shots, mini campaigns, long-term campaigns, convention play, those kinds of things. So that's that's a way to do it. So I do group initiative. Anyone else? Then everyone else goes to it simultaneously in a tie. Yeah. All right. So I was just trying to match these up. Ron Howard. So So in a tie, you go with the highest dexterity modifier to improve upon or determine that that's the one that goes first in the case of the tie. That actually makes sense. That's a pretty cool. The thing is that most opposition in D&D doesn't have a dexterity modifier, so that player is always going to go first when they win or when they tie. But hey, that's cool. That works as well. So let's see. Let me take a look at one of my wrap-up banners. So the last banner I talked about a little bit was so the 3 pillars, rules, light, and role-playing. And I think we pretty much made that, we accepted that argument that more complex rules often leads to playing off the character sheet rather than playing on the character sheet. I'm sorry. utilizing just the information that the character sheet gives, rather than playing beyond the character sheet, which I think is the better way to describe that. So playing beyond the character sheet is what role-playing is meant to be. Thinking outside the box, putting yourself in your character's perspective as a player when you're running, trying to talk from the perspective of the character, utilizing the knowledge of your character, and then very minimally, this is where my character is, this is what my character is doing. And then the DM feeds information based on reasonable outcomes, describes just what the character is experiencing based on location and action that they have declared they're taking. Yes, play beyond the character sheet is the best way. I don't even think that that's an opinion. I think that is a, that is a fact. So what is that? It's a law, not a theory. Anytime you play beyond the character sheet, you are effectively playing better. And that takes time. I mean, that takes time. It takes, building in a confidence, not just the confidence in the game system, but a confidence in what your character can do and cannot do, not just within the system, but also within the party, and having that group dynamic and that cohesion that takes place when players are very familiar with each other and they know each other's characters and they know what each other's characters' capabilities and personality quirks and they're able to start to think what their character's action is doing, not just based on what the other characters are doing, but they'll start anticipating what the other characters are going to do in a particular situation. And and it's been my experience again, that my players tend to anticipate what the others do, and they more often than not kind of have that SOP, standard operating procedure that they follow through with, and only once in a while they surprise everybody. But hey, that could be role play too, right? When they do something completely outside of expectations, out of the box, and it surprises the other characters. I was like, damn, I didn't see him doing that, and now they have to react to it, and I encourage them to role play that out rather than get talking about, well, wait a second, I want to look in the rule book to see if that could be done, or, what was his dice roll again? Can we, shouldn't he have rolled that? No, don't talk like that. Talk about just what your character is seeing, and then respond in character, in some way, whether it's a physical response, a movement response, quickly change up what your character might have said he was going to do but didn't do yet, and react. My players often, I'm really going to wrap this up real fast. My players often will hold back their action, even though their action might segment-wise have gone first, to see what other outcomes, happen before they do that. So like my archers might wait to fire after melee has gone and then make their action instead. that way they can kind of weigh out the situation much differently and then respond accordingly, even though their action might have come first. Or they might call out and say, to the melee combatants, I'm on the orc on the left. All right. And that way the melee combatants will know, well, I'm going to prepare to engage something else in response to that, and communication is key to that kind of thing. So it also takes a DM who says yes. Sometimes DMs have to say no too. So, yeah. It takes a DM, I think, who allows players to make decisions for their characters and then holds them to that and then fairly and openly arbitrates that through the dice rolls. So it takes a DM who trusts their players, and then the players need to trust their DM and trust their DM's roles. And the only way that happens is if they're public roles. So limit the number of secret roles that you're doing as a DM, and that will kind of produce that dynamic that you're looking for at the table. That is very, I think, conducive. It really does enhance and encourage role playing when everyone has that basis of trust. And and like I said very early on, I expect my players to be bold with their characters. This is heroic fantasy, and so let's start wrapping this up here and leave it at that. I will look for any more new comments. I seem to be caught up, so I actually was able to keep up with the comments fairly quickly. Listen, I thank everyone for having dropped in. And it's great to see you all. I hope you had a great holiday this Saturday night, so enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I am going to wrap this up, especially for the new people that came in tonight. Left some comments here, some things that, really eye-opening and makes me think about some of this stuff. So you all have a good night, and I will be back in action, hopefully much better than it was tonight, come tomorrow. So you'll have a great one. And we are